Mom, you're still getting the $5,000 from Melissa every month, right? That question landed on my kitchen table like shattering glass. Andrew wouldn't look at me. He just held his coffee mug with both hands, like letting go of it might make him lose his balance. I stood by the counter, my fingers still smelling like lemon from the dishes I'd been washing. Mother's Day had always been simple for me. A small kitchen, 2 bowls, and the quiet joy of my son stopping by, even if only for 10 minutes. My name is Irene Whitfield, 68 years old, living on the west side of Cleveland. I spent nearly 30 years as a nurse at Lakewood Family Clinic. I retired after my hip surgery at 64. I'm not wealthy, but I'm independent. I pay my bills on time. I can stretch 2 chickens into a week of meals, and nothing warms me more than neighbors dropping off vegetables from their backyard gardens. My life is small, but steady. At least, it used to be. And then Andrew asked about the $5,000. What did you say, Andrew? I tried to keep my voice steady. He swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on the table. Melissa said, "We've been sending you money for 8 months, $5,000 a month, and you've been getting it, right?" 68 years old, and still learning how to steady my own heart, not because of the money, but because of the truth. For 8 months, I'd been living on my savings, cutting back on everything, stretching every bill, every meal. I looked at my son, a good man, an honest man, but someone had placed a veil right in front of his eyes. You really want to know the truth? I asked softly. He nodded without looking up. That hurt more than anything he could have said. I took a slow breath. No, Andrew, I said. I haven't received a single dollar. He finally looked at me. His eyes widened, then dimmed. Not angry, not shocked, just broken. Like a child realizing for the first time that adults can lie. He leaned back in his chair. Mom, I didn't know. Melissa told me you were getting everything. I lifted my hand to stop him. It's okay, sweetheart. It's Mother's Day. Let's not talk about this. But we both knew the truth. My Mother's Day had ended the moment he asked that question. That afternoon, Andrew left with a rushed hug. I stood at the doorway watching his car disappear down the street, the sound of the engine fading, and a weight settled over my shoulders. A truth I didn't want, but couldn't deny. My son had no idea what was happening, but the person living with him knew exactly what she was doing. I walked back inside. The kitchen felt quiet, almost as if it understood I was stepping into a battle I never asked for. The electric bill lay on the table. My arthritis bottle was nearly empty. In the fridge, half a loaf of bread, a few eggs, and wilted greens. $40,000 gone. And I'd been forced to live like someone scraping by on loose change. I wasn't ashamed. I felt underestimated. That evening, I opened the cabinet under the sink and pulled out a worn leather notebook, the one I would later call the Justice Journal. I wrote, Mother's Day. Andrew asked about the money. 8 months. Not a single dollar reached me. Someone is lying. Someone is using my silence to walk over me. My handwriting trembled a bit, not because my hands were shaking, but because I was a mother, touching the outline of an ugly truth. I'd helped so many patients recognize signs of financial abuse within their own families. But I never imagined the next victim would be me. I closed the journal. Only one person had the power to lie to Andrew about his mother's money, and it wasn't me. That night, the rain started. Raindrops tapped on the roof like a countdown clock. I sat in my old armchair by the window, the one I saved 6 months for after my surgery. I looked out at the dark street, the glow of the streetlights bouncing off puddles, and I wondered, if I didn't get those $5,000 for 8 months, where did that money go? And who was living off my breath? The answer wasn't in my house. It was sitting in Key Bank, and I was going to find it. Not for the money, but for the dignity of a mother who had always stood on her own feet. Before going to bed, I opened the Justice Journal again and wrote one last line. Silence isn't kindness. Silence is how people learn to walk on your back. I closed the book, turned off the light, and listened to the rain. Tomorrow, I would walk into the bank. Tomorrow, the truth would start to show its face. If you're listening to this and you've ever had a moment where you doubted someone inside your own family, tell me what city you're watching from. And if this story has you wondering what comes next, hit like and subscribe so I can share the next part with you, where the truth finally begins to surface. There are no incoming transfers to your name, Mrs. Whitfield. Hearing Laura say that felt like lightning cracking through the cold lobby of Key Bank. Not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed the one truth I've been trying not to face. Someone in my own family had built a lie, and built it right on top of me. I straightened my back and tightened my grip on my purse strap to hide the slight tremor in my hands. Laura tilted the monitor toward me, the words, "No incoming transfers," staring back, blank, blunt, and merciless. Could this be some kind of system error? I asked, even though the question sounded like I was trying to comfort myself. Laura shook her head. This system is accurate down to the cent. If the money came through, it would be here. I stared at the empty numbers and let out a long breath. 8 months, $40,000. Too large a sum to vanish without a trace. Unless someone wanted it to. Would you like me to print the statements for the last 8 months? Laura asked. I want the most detailed version you have. She nodded. While the printer hummed, I watched her mid-30s, honest face, the kind of woman who had probably seen more cases of women being financially exploited by their own families than she could ever talk about. In Cleveland, it wasn't rare. When she handed me the papers, I thanked her and turned to leave, but she called after me. Mrs. Whitfield, if you ever need to check the sender's account, I can walk you through it. I turned back, my voice low. You've helped me more than you know. Outside, the wind off Lake Erie slapped across my face, blowing my gray scarf off my shoulder. I pulled myself together the way you pull both ends of a fraying rope. Andrew didn't lie. My son isn't the kind of man who would. But Melissa, she always showed up in the story whenever something didn't add up. I walked faster toward the bus stop, every step carving a deeper line of determination than I'd felt since retirement. If they'd been telling me all this time that the money is going through, then who was getting it? The only person who could answer that wasn't the bank. It was someone who'd worked in finance for 35 years, Briggs. I arrived at Briggs's law office in the late afternoon. Old wooden door, faded brass nameplate, and inside the smell of paper that had lived longer than my generation. Briggs peered at me over thick glasses. What's going on, Irene? I placed the stack of statements on his desk. Help me look at this, please. He didn't ask anything else. He simply opened the printout, marked sections with a pencil, and frowned deeply. There were no actual transfers, Briggs said, but there's something strange. My breath caught. Andrew set up a reoccurring payment, he went on, but the recipient isn't you. I leaned back in the chair, my heartbeat slowing like it needed a moment to understand. What do you mean? Someone changed the receiving account. They used your name, but not your information. Forgery? I asked quietly. Exactly. I closed my eyes, and Melissa's face flashed. The smile always a little too bright, the voice always a bit too sweet, and eyes that watched me like I was something she had to tolerate. Briggs rested his hand on the papers. I'll request a deeper audit, but Irene. He looked straight at me. This isn't random. I didn't ask who. I already knew. That night I came home, hung my coat, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the table. The silence in my house was so sharp I could hear every tick of the clock like a knock on the door. I opened the Justice Journal and wrote, "No transfers. A fake account. Briggs confirmed the recipient was impersonated. Only one person close enough to do that. And she calls me Mom." I set the pen down. It wasn't that I was being dramatic. It wasn't that I was imagining things. It wasn't that I didn't give Melissa a chance. It was that Melissa never once saw me as her mother-in-law. She saw me as a wallet, one she assumed was still full. At 9 p.m., the landline rang. The sound was sharp, cutting straight through the quiet. It was Andrew. "Mom, I talked to Melissa." I stayed silent. She said, "Maybe you forgot because you always put the envelopes in the kitchen drawer. Does that sound right to you?" I looked around my small kitchen, one cabinet, 3 drawers, nowhere to hide 8 months of envelopes. "Do you believe that?" I asked. Andrew was silent long enough that I could hear the faintest breath on the line. "I don't know." But I heard the real answer buried inside those 3 words. He wanted to believe Melissa, but his heart wouldn't let him. "Andrew," I said gently, "I'm going to check a few things. Don't tell Melissa. Don't let her know I'm looking into this." He exhaled softly. "Okay, Mom, I just want the truth." "Of course," I said. "So do I." When he hung up, I held the phone in my hand for a few seconds. Part of me wanted to protect him, comfort him, hold him, but the other part, the part pressed under $40,000, knew the truth had to come first. I walked to the window and watched the rain fall across the quiet street. Every drop seemed to hammer out the same questions. Why would Melissa do this? And what made her so sure I'd never find out? People who take advantage of others always underestimate 2 things: a mother, and someone who has lived long enough to know that the truth always rises. I grabbed my coat. Rain or not, it didn't matter. Tomorrow, I'd return to Briggs for the deeper audit results. I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. I was afraid of not finding it. Before bed, I wrote one more line in the Justice Journal. A person can hide stolen money for a while, but the eyes of a liar never hide anything. And with that line, I knew this investigation wasn't about the money anymore. It was about finding the exact moment my own family betrayed me. Melissa pulled into my driveway in a brand new Lexus on the very same week I discovered the fake account. The shock wasn't the car itself. It was the way she parked it, right over the crack in the pavement. The same crack I'd waited 3 years for the city to fix. She stepped out, her heels hitting the wet pavement, a cream-colored wool coat pressed tight against her body by the wind off Lake Erie. She smiled, a smile so bright it couldn't possibly be real. Only one thing was real. Somewhere inside that shiny new lifestyle were my $40,000. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. "Mom!" Melissa chirped, the way people do when they don't respect the person they're talking to. "I thought you were at work today," I asked, keeping my voice steady, steadier than I expected from myself. She twirled her Lexus key around her finger like a prize she'd won. "Oh, I'm working from home this month. The company allows it." A clean lie. Smooth. No stutter, but just a little too quick. That tiny hesitation people have when they're afraid of being questioned. I glanced at the car again. A 2022 model. Around $42,000. That number clung to my mind like ink sinking into fabric. Melissa walked into my house as if she owned it. Her eyes drifted across the living room, silently evaluating the worth of everything I'd kept for decades. The sofa from 2003, the rug I washed myself, the framed photo of Andrew at 8 years old. "I brought you a few things," she said, placing a bag on the kitchen counter. I didn't ask what was inside. I just watched. Watched the way she opened drawers like someone who'd done it many times. Watched her breathe. Watched that smug little smile she tried to hide. "Andrew and I talked last night," Melissa said casually. "About the money. You probably misplaced the envelope somewhere." I didn't answer. She said it too easily, too smoothly, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror. "Actually," she added, If you ever need us to send a little extra for your expenses, just say the word. Don't worry about it. That line, for me, was more insulting than stealing the money itself. I turned away and poured myself a glass of water. My hands didn't shake. I'd already moved past the hurt. "When did you buy the Lexus?" I asked lightly, as if asking about the weather. Melissa froze, just half a second. But half a second was enough to show I'd hit the nerve she was trying to hide. "Oh, it's a used car. Andrew bought it for me." I nodded. Andrew. The man paying for the whole world on a technician's salary. Andrew, who called me last night wondering if someone was lying to him. Andrew, who didn't even know where his money was going. Melissa's lie landed on the floor like a cracked glass. She left after 15 minutes, the smell of expensive perfume lingering in my house long after she was gone. As the Lexus faded down the street, I grabbed my phone and called Janine, my neighbor and a former accountant. "Can you come over for a minute?" I asked. Janine arrived in 10 minutes carrying an old file case like a detective in a noir film. "I just saw Melissa pulling up in that Lexus," she said before I could speak. "That car is not something Andrew could buy." "What do you know?" I asked quietly. Janine opened her case and pulled out a notebook. "I used to do the books for Melissa's old company. She's not a saver, and she has nowhere near the income to afford that car." A cold feeling crept up my spine. "Janine, I think she took my money." Janine didn't even look surprised. I suspected that 2 years ago. Melissa spends money like it grows back every morning. That afternoon, I went straight back to Briggs's office. No hesitation, no second guessing. He looked up from a stack of files. "I just found the receiving account," Briggs said. "And Irene, you might want to sit." I sat. My body felt light, like my bones had been lifted out. "The recipient," he said slowly, "is an account named Irene W. But the email isn't yours. The phone number isn't yours. And the person who registered that account is Melissa Caldwell." Not a punch, not a knife. It was a silent slap, one that made every nerve in my body tighten at once. I closed my eyes for one breath. When I opened them, there were no tears. That luxury had left me. Briggs continued, "This qualifies as second-degree financial impersonation. You can press charges. You should." I looked out the window, where the first snowflakes of the season were beginning to fall. I thought of Andrew. This would hurt him. Every family splits differently, but the deepest cracks always cut through the center. Still, sometimes to save someone, you have to let them see the truth first. "Prepare the document," I said. "I want everything." Briggs nodded. "We'll do everything by the book." I stood. "Briggs," I said quietly, "do you know what hurts me the most?" "What is it?" Melissa was confident I'd never find out. That evening I came home, opened a drawer, and pulled out a white envelope. On the first line I wrote, "Evidence package, Melissa Caldwell." Inside I placed the bank statements, the photo of the Lexus, Janine's notes, and the transaction list Briggs printed. Each sheet of paper was a cut into the part of me that always believed in family, the part that would rather suffer quietly than burden my son. I sealed the envelope and tucked it into the second drawer. I knew what I had to do now, not for the money, for the truth. And because Andrew deserved a life not controlled by someone who lies with intention. I turned off the kitchen light. The house dimmed around me, but my mind wasn't dim anymore. I had finally learned something every woman my age eventually has to face. Silence saves no one. Speaking up is where justice begins. That same evening, Melissa walked straight into her own trap, using the very mouth that had already taken $40,000 from me. She called Andrew the moment I placed the evidence envelope into the kitchen drawer. Her voice was loud enough that I heard every word, even though Andrew had her on speaker in the bathroom. Baby, I think your mom doesn't really manage her money well. I'll take care of it. Maybe I should hold on to her card just to make things easier. I stood in the hallway, dish towel still in my hand, feeling something tighten around my heart. If part 3 was when I learned the truth, then this moment was when I realized she had planned the theft long before it happened. This was an impulse. This wasn't one mistake. This was strategy. She didn't know I was standing just outside the door. She didn't know I heard every word, each one slicing into the kindness I'd given them since their wedding day. Andrew stepped out of the bathroom, hair still dripping, and the moment he saw my face, he froze. Mom, what's wrong? I said just one sentence, steady, calm, without anger. Andrew, I want both of you to have dinner with me this Friday, all 3 of us. Melissa heard it. I knew she heard it. And I also knew she believed Friday night would be an evening where I apologized. She had no idea that dinner was the trap she had set for herself. Friday arrived faster than I expected. Cleveland skies were gray, soft snow dusting the roof like a quiet warning before a storm. I set the table that afternoon. 2 tall candles, a pewter gray tablecloth, the dinnerware I'd kept for more than 20 years. I wanted everything calm, warm, familiar, because the cruelest betrayals always bloom where tenderness once lived. At exactly 6:03 p.m., the Lexus door slammed shut in my driveway. Through the window, I watched Melissa adjust her hair, smooth her coat, and pull a perfect smile onto her face. Andrew walked behind her, eyes on the ground, hands pushed deep in his pockets, the posture of a man more afraid of the truth than the pain that comes with it. Mom, Andrew whispered as he stepped inside. Is everything okay? I placed my hand over his and squeezed gently. You'll know everything tonight. Melissa stepped in behind him, shifting her scarf aside, her voice sweet like honey cut with sedative. Mom, I brought your favorite wine. Thank you, I said. Have a seat. She sat right in the center of the table, the seat people choose when they think they're the one directing the meeting. That was fine. She'd only be in charge for the first 3 minutes. I poured water, not wine. I wanted everyone's mind clear. There was no room for fog tonight. So, when did you buy the Lexus? I asked, my tone light, like placing a paperclip on the table. If someone were innocent, they'd laugh, explain, maybe even tease. But Melissa didn't move. Her smile shifted, just a millimeter. I already told you, it's used. Andrew glanced at her, eyebrows pulling together. A small gesture, but enough to show he was cracking inside. I stood and walked to the cabinet. The kitchen fell silent. Only the clock ticked, the sound of truth getting ready to surface. I pulled out the white envelope, the one labeled in careful handwriting, evidence package, Melissa Caldwell. I placed it on the table. Not slamming it, not making a scene, just setting it down, smooth and simple. But to Melissa, it might as well have been a bomb. What is that? She asked, her voice a shade higher. A gift, I said. Go ahead, open it. She looked at Andrew, searching for reassurance. But Andrew's eyes were fixed on the envelope, a look of fear in them. The fear that whatever was inside might reshape his entire life. Melissa opened it. I watched her hand tremble just once before she tightened her grip. The first sheet, the bank statements. 8 transfers, 8 times $5,000. The second, a photo of her Lexus taken the day she parked it in front of my house. The third, Janine's notes about her spending habits. The fourth, Briggs's documentation of the fake account under my name. The papers fell onto the table like a rain of blades, slicing her lies to pieces. Melissa opened her mouth, but no words came out. Even the best liars choke when faced with proof. Melissa, I said softly, You took my money and forged my information. This isn't a family issue anymore. This is a crime. Andrew shot to his feet. Melissa, tell me this isn't real. You told me Mom lost the envelopes. You said she was confused. Melissa tried to recover, but her voice shook. I did it for us, Andrew. For our future. I stood, cutting through her sentence. You took my money to buy a Lexus. Not for anyone's future, just for yourself. The room went so quiet I could hear my own breathing, and in that silence, I felt the most painful truth of all. I hadn't lost money. I'd lost the trust I'd built in my son for 30 years. Andrew collapsed into the chair, hands over his face. How could you? Melissa looked around like a cornered animal. No exits. No excuses left. Finally, she whispered, the weakest sentence every guilty person eventually says. Please, don't make this a big deal. I looked straight at her, not angry, just clear. I'm not making it big. You made it big. All I'm doing is turning on the light. When they left that night, Andrew walked ahead, Melissa trailing behind him. No laughter. No confidence in the way the Lexus engine started. Just one sentence echoing in my mind like a promise. Justice begins the moment you stop being afraid of the truth. And I wasn't afraid anymore. The next morning, Melissa sent me exactly 8 text messages, all with the same request. Please delete those papers. No apology, no admission. Just an attempt to erase the evidence. I sat by the window, the cold light off Lake Erie reflecting against my mug of ginger tea. In 68 years of living, I had never seen a confession weaker than that. Delete the evidence meant she knew she was guilty. And for me, that was enough. My phone rang. It was Briggs. Mrs. Whitfield, he said plainly. I've finished the paperwork. If you want to move to the next step, I'll need your signature before 5 this afternoon. The next step. I looked around my small home, the tablecloth, the photo of Andrew smiling next to his first bike, the tiny cactus I raised from a cutting. Everything I ever protected for my son was now just the backdrop to a truth he wasn't brave enough to face. But sometimes, to save your child, a mother has to shine a light on the thing he's afraid to see. I'll be there, I said. That afternoon, I opened the evidence package envelope on the kitchen table and arranged each piece like a precise investigation. 1. 8 transfer records. Dates, times, receiving account. 2. The photo of the Lexus Melissa stepping out, smiling, with my money on her face. 3. Janine's notes, proof of Melissa's reckless spending habits. 4. Briggs's report, confirming the fake account under my name. 5. Melissa's emails to Andrew, complaining that your mom can't manage money. I placed a blank sheet of paper on top and wrote in blue ink, "This is not revenge. This is self-respect." The truth line of the story I was living. When everything was sorted, I folded the envelope. It felt thick, heavy, like holding my entire life in one hand. Filled with proof, filled with pain, but filled with power, too. I arrived at Briggs's office at 2:17 p.m. The sky was charcoal gray, snow gathering on the shoulders of my wool coat. His assistant led me into the conference room. Briggs was waiting, serious as ever. He slid a thick file across the table. This is the full case. Elder financial exploitation, civil penalties, restitution, interest, court fees. If the judge grants everything, Melissa will owe more than what she stole. I looked at the words, elder financial exploitation. I never imagined I, a mother, a grandmother, a retired nurse would become a victim of that, and from someone inside my own family. Briggs continued. There's something you should prepare yourself for. Andrew may side with Melissa at first. It happens a lot. Marriage is magic. Truth isn't. I took a deep breath. I don't want to destroy my son's marriage, I said. You're not, Briggs answered gently. Melissa already did. All you're doing is pulling the curtain back. I signed. The blue ink slid across the page like the final cut in a long season of endurance. As I stepped outside, snow was falling heavier. Cleveland streets glowed under yellow streetlights, cars slowing on the slushy road. My phone buzzed. Andrew. His voice cracked the moment I answered. Mom, Melissa said you're lying. She said you made all of this up to break us apart. I stopped on the sidewalk, snow catching in my hair. Do you want to believe that? I asked. There was a long silence, long enough to split time in two. I don't know, Andrew whispered. Then come over tonight, I said. Alone. I'll show you everything. I knew he was standing between two worlds, the wife he loved and the mother who raised him for 30 years. It wasn't a fair fight, but truth doesn't wait for anyone. That night, someone knocked at 8:42 p.m. Andrew stood there, eyes red, face exhausted, like he'd been fighting all day. Mom, he murmured. Let me see the envelope. I brought him into the kitchen, the same room that fed his childhood with hot dinners and old lessons. I set the envelope on the table. Andrew opened it, sheet by sheet, proof by proof, every page reminding him that the woman he thought was protecting their home had been tearing it apart with pretty lies. He stopped at the 5th bank statement. His mouth tightened. His eyes no longer darted away. Mom, he said, voice gravelly. Why would she do this? I didn't have an answer. People like Melissa don't steal from need. They steal for control. Are you angry at me? I asked quietly. Andrew shook his head, hands trembling. Angry at you? No, I'm angry at myself because I let her use me to hurt you. I placed my hand on his. Andrew, all of us go blind when we love the wrong person. He lowered his head, tears falling onto the evidence. What am I supposed to do now? You do what's right, I said, even when it hurts. In that moment, I saw something shift inside him, not broken, but awakened. When Andrew left that night, I watched his shadow fade down the snow-covered sidewalk. I didn't know what his future with Melissa would look like, but I knew one thing. The truth had gone too far to be buried again. And I had stepped into the stage every mother fears but must face. Setting a boundary with your own child to save him from a life being controlled. I locked the door. I looked at the evidence envelope one last time. Tomorrow, Briggs would file the case with the Cuyahoga County Court, and from that moment on, no one would ever be able to bury what Melissa had done. 3 days after Andrew learned the truth, Melissa went to the police to file a report, claiming I had threatened her. She didn't report the $40,000. She didn't report the fake account. She didn't report the Lexus. She reported that I scared her. I was standing in my living room when Andrew called, his voice cracking. Mom, Melissa said she's filing for an emergency protective order against you. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because there are moments when shamelessness crosses into pure absurdity. A person who steals your money, asking the law to protect her from you. Calm down, I told him. She's scared, and when guilty people panic, they shatter like cheap glass. But I knew this was an escalation. She'd realized she couldn't silence the truth with text messages. So now she was trying the law, a distraction tactic, hoping Andrew would panic. But Melissa didn't understand 2 things. 1, I've survived storms she's never even heard of. 2, I was prepared for every blow she thought she could land. That afternoon, Briggs called. I just received something strange, he said. Melissa sent an email to my office claiming you're making everything up. But, Mrs. Whitfield, she sent it to the wrong person. The wrong person? She CC'd the neighborhood police unit. I closed my eyes and let out a long breath. Not tired, not sad. More like someone watching a villain in a play who doesn't understand her own script. She just put herself on the police radar, Briggs said. This is good for us. Good, meaning that even as she tried to destroy me, she was actually cornering herself. I knew what had to happen next. Monday morning, I walked into the Cleveland police station in my soft, gray, wool coat. Not to report her back, like she probably expected, but to place the case exactly where it belonged, in the hands of law enforcement, before Melissa could twist herself into the role of victim. The officer at the desk looked up. "How can we help you, ma'am?" I set the thick envelope on the counter. "I'd like to file a report for financial misconduct. The person involved is my future daughter-in-law." He flipped through the papers. He didn't look at me. He looked at the evidence. Then he said quietly, "This is serious, ma'am." "So am I." That night, Cleveland felt darker than usual. The wind from Lake Erie hit my windows like metal scraping against metal. I made ginger tea, turned on the lamp, and sat at the wooden table that had stayed with me for over 20 years. I thought I'd feel lighter after filing the report, but I didn't. I felt sad down to the bone. I've lived long enough to know justice always comes with a cost, and the price this time was Andrew's face. Rushed, torn, confused, trying to hold on to both sides at once. I was saving my son, but to save him, I had to let his heart break first. Around 9:11 p.m., I heard a car pull up outside. Not the Lexus, Andrew's old sedan. He walked in without knocking, the same way he used to when he'd run home after baseball practice as a kid. "Mom," he whispered, "Melissa found out you filed the report." I nodded. Andrew rubbed his hands together, eyes glossy. "She's furious. She said you're trying to destroy our marriage." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Andrew, look at me." He lifted his eyes. "She destroyed your marriage when she took $40,000 from your mother, not me." Andrew pressed his lips together. "I know," he said, voice breaking. "For the first time in my life, I think I loved the wrong person." I pulled him into my arms. I didn't say I warned you. I didn't say I was right. I just held my son. A 68-year-old mother holding the last soft piece of her heart. When Andrew left, I stood in the hallway shadow and listened to his car disappear down the narrow street. The red taillight swept across my window like a thin streak of blood. I knew in that moment that his love for Melissa had cracked, a deep fracture that would never heal the same. But the road ahead was still long. The next morning, my phone buzzed. "Briggs." "You're standing up, right?" he asked. "I'm in the kitchen." "Hold on to the counter. I've got news." I gripped the edge of the counter. Melissa just emptied the entire joint account she shares with Andrew. My body went still. All my years as a mother taught me one thing. Innocent people don't run. Only the guilty do. "Briggs, what does that mean?" "It means she's preparing to flee, or worse, hide assets to avoid restitution. But the good news is, this will backfire." Backfire? "The police will see it as asset flight during an active investigation." I closed my eyes. Every domino Melissa had set up was now toppling back onto her. That afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number, just one line. "Irene, you will pay for this. M." I sat down, not shaking, not terrified. I'd heard worse threats in my life, in hospitals, on night shifts, from people drowning in desperation. What saddened me was this. Melissa still thought this was a fight between two women, not a fight between truth and deception. I typed back, "Justice always arrives on time." Then I set the phone down and exhaled. Not scared, not bitter, just ready, because there's something Melissa would never understand. Every mother has a limit, and when that limit is crossed, that mother becomes the strongest force she will ever face. Tomorrow, Briggs would file the lawsuit. Tomorrow, Melissa would be officially served. And tomorrow, the truth would step into the cold Cleveland light. The next morning at exactly 7:12 a.m., police knocked on Melissa's door. While she was still in her silk pajamas, believing she still controlled the narrative, I knew because Andrew called me immediately, his voice trembling like someone standing in the center of a storm. "Mom, they just came to the house. They served Melissa the summons. She lost it." I stood still in my kitchen, phone warm in my hand. Not shocked, not shaken, just aware of one truth. When the truth knocks, liars always show their real face. No makeup can cover that. "Good," I said softly. Everything is finally moving the way it should. An hour later, Melissa sent an email to every relative on Andrew's side of the family. The subject line read, "Irene is mentally unstable." I read every sentence, every cheap accusation, that I was forgetful, confused, hallucinating, that I imagined the missing 40,000. What she didn't understand was simple. These people had known me for over 3 decades, and when a 68-year-old woman speaks clearly, smiles calmly, looks you in the eye without a tremor, nobody believes she's unstable. Melissa wasn't destroying me. She was burying herself deeper. That afternoon, Briggs called. "I have more news, Mrs. Whitfield," he said. "The police compared the signature on the bank transfers. It's not yours." I closed my eyes. Part of me hurt, the part that cherished family, the part that believed love could save someone from their own greed. But another part, the part Melissa had awakened, stood firm like an old oak on the edge of Lake Erie, unmovable in the wind. "Good," I said. "Keep going, Briggs." He exhaled slowly. "Melissa will get more desperate now that she knows we have proof of forgery. You need to be prepared." "I've been prepared since the day she drove that Lexus into my driveway," I said. "The world is seeing her clearly now." That evening, while cooking a simple dinner, eggs, toast, a bit of strawberry jam, there was a pounding at the door so hard the skillet on the stove rattled. I opened it. Melissa stood there, not with her usual polished smile, but with smeared mascara, red-rimmed eyes, and a face twisted by panic. "What do you want from me?" she screamed. I studied her for a long moment. A grown woman, wealthy, confident, perfectly styled, now looked like a teenager, losing control of everything at once. "I don't want anything," I said. "I just want the truth." "The truth?" She scoffed, almost laughing. "Who's gonna believe you? You're just—" "The woman who raised the man you're clinging to like your last life raft," I cut in. "Don't forget that." Melissa inhaled sharply, her shoulders trembling. "You have no right to ruin my life." "Melissa," I said, voice low and steady, "I'm not ruining your life. I'm turning on the light you've been trying so hard to avoid." She said nothing. No comeback, no clever twist, just one cold line thrown like a knife. "Andrew will choose me." Then she turned and walked away, her heels carving deep marks into the snow-like claw marks from someone losing everything. When the door closed, I knew Melissa wasn't done. And her next move wouldn't be words. It would be an action. I didn't know what kind, but I knew it would come fast. The next morning, proof arrived in a way I didn't expect. Janine showed up at my door, her coat dusted with snow. "I have something you need to see," she said. We sat in my kitchen. She reached into her bag and pulled out a printed email from Melissa's former workplace. "She stole money from a coworker," Janine said. "It wasn't much, $1,200, but the pattern is identical." Pattern. A behavioral blueprint. Not the first time, not an accident. Someone who steals once will steal twice. Someone who takes $1,200 will take $40,000 without blinking. I touched the page. It felt like the final brick in a wall the truth had been building. "Janine," I asked quietly, Would you testify if it comes to that? She nodded without hesitation. For you, absolutely. That afternoon, Andrew came over. He didn't say, "Hi," didn't smile, didn't hug me. He just stood in the doorway, eyes empty and exhausted. A man losing his own private battle. "She threw all my things onto the driveway," he said. "Mom, she told me to pick a side." A sharp pain cut through me. The kind only mothers understand when they watch their child stand between heartbreak and truth. "You're staying here tonight," I said simply. Andrew didn't respond, but he came inside, took off his shoes, and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he did 5th grade homework. After a long silence, he whispered, "Mom, where did I go wrong? Why didn't I see it?" I sat beside him, touching his hand lightly. "When you love the wrong person," I said, "your eyes go blind for a while. It happens to all of us." Andrew looked down at the evidence package still on the table from Part 5. "I'm going to talk to a lawyer," he said slowly. "I'm going to do the right thing." For the first time, I saw my son standing with the truth, not with the person manipulating him, and I knew this was the moment Melissa could never prepare for. That night, I sat by the window and watched the snow fall quiet, steady, like white memories drifting to the ground. I wasn't happy. I wasn't triumphant. I only felt a deep, still quiet, the kind that comes right before a storm. Because I knew what was coming next. The exposé dinner. A dinner where Melissa would be unmasked in front of Andrew, family, and the most important witness of all, Briggs. She still thought she had a chance to spin the story. But that dinner would be where the entire web, every lie, finally snapped. Melissa walked into the restaurant wearing the smile of someone who still believes she was winning, completely unaware that the man sitting by the window was Detective Briggs. She pulled out her chair, settling into her perfect daughter-in-law act, not realizing every step she took was straight into the final trap. I watched her for a moment, the expensive coat, the freshly done nails, the perfectly curled hair, all paid for with my money. Andrew sat beside her, shoulders slightly hunched, holding his anger like a bomb pressed against his ribs. "Mom, we're here," he whispered. I placed my hand on his and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Thank you, Andrew. Tonight, everything becomes clear." I didn't say it ends. I didn't say it begins. Just clear. Because when the truth is bright enough, it lights up every dark corner on its own. The small Cleveland restaurant was packed that night. The clinking of silverware, soft laughter, wine glasses catching the warm winter light. Melissa looked around, frowning. "Why are there so many people? I thought this was just a family dinner." "It is," I said. "Family, and 2 guests." She blinked, confused. Briggs rose from the table near the window. He didn't need an introduction. Melissa's face froze the second she saw him. "What?" she stammered. "What is he doing here?" I smiled softly. "To witness." The air at the table shifted, like a cold wind slipping through a closed window. The server poured water. I placed the evidence package in front of Melissa. Not hidden in my kitchen, not tucked inside a drawer, but right in the middle of a crowded restaurant. A place where lies had no room left to hide. "Open it," I said. Melissa forced a smile. "This again? I told you." Andrew slammed his palm against the table, hard enough to make the glasses tremble. "Melissa, open it." She froze. She didn't even take a breath. and she opened it. The evidence spilled out like metal leaves. 8 transfers, the Lexus photos, the signature forgery confirmation, Janine's written statement, proof she'd stolen $1,200 at her old job. By the 3rd page, her face went pale. By the 4th, her lips trembled. By the 6th, I saw what I had waited weeks to see. Real panic. This isn't mine," she whispered. Briggs stood at that exact moment, his voice low and sharp as a blade. "Miss Caldwell, the police are now investigating. The forged signature is in their possession. You have the right to remain silent." Melissa shot up from her chair. "Andrew! You believe him over me? Over your own wife?" No one answered, and that silence was the answer. Andrew swallowed hard. I saw his jaw tighten, the expression of a man who had finally reached his limit. "You've lied too many times," Andrew said quietly. "This time." "I can't save you." Melissa threw her napkin on the table. "What do you want from me? An apology? Tears? You want me to beg?" I looked at her for a long, steady moment. "No," I said. "What we want is for you to stop." So small a sentence, but it made her take a step back. "You took my money," I continued, voice calm and even. "You forged my signature. You attacked my character. And you lied to Andrew for months." Each sentence fell like a hammer. Melissa didn't speak. Not a word. Briggs placed another envelope on the table. "This is your summons. You are required to appear at Cuyahoga County Court next Monday." She began to cry, not with guilt, but with the desperation of someone who had finally run out of exits. "Andrew, please, say something," she begged. Andrew lowered his head. I saw tears fall into his hands that had been shaking for weeks but were now steady. "I'll be there," he whispered, "but not to defend you. I'll be there to tell the truth." Melissa staggered back as if struck, then turned and stormed out of the restaurant, heels scraping across the floor. No one followed her. No one tried to stop her. The silence she left behind revealed every fracture she'd forced into Andrew's life. I sat back, breathing in slowly. The air didn't feel heavy anymore. Oddly enough, it felt lighter. Truth doesn't destroy. Truth releases. Briggs gathered the papers and nodded. "You did well. Very well." I looked at Andrew. The tears were gone. He stared at his hands, steady now, no longer trembling. "Mom," he whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I touched his cheek. "It's not your fault," I said. "Good people always believe the good." We sat there a while longer. No words, just the soft sounds of dishes and distant conversations. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm breaks and the sky finally exhales. On Monday morning, Melissa walked into the courthouse with 2 officers at her sides. Not because she'd been arrested, but because she'd tried to storm into the clerk's office to rip up my lawsuit. Andrew called me the moment it happened. Behind him, I could hear pure chaos. Shouting, shoes scraping against marble floors, an officer ordering, "Ma'am, calm down." "Mom," Andrew gasped. "She's totally out of control. She tried to slam into Briggs's office door." I tightened my grip on the phone. Truth doesn't kill people. It just strips them down until the mask falls off. And Melissa was unraveling, one thread at a time. When I arrived at the Cuyahoga County Courthouse, the wind off Lake Erie hit my face like needles, but I didn't shiver. I'd been preparing for this day since the moment she took the first dollar from me. In the waiting area, Melissa sat hunched over on a bench, mascara smeared, hair tangled, her expensive coat looking like a shell that no longer fit. Beside her was a young attorney who didn't look a day over 30. She glared at me like I was the last enemy she saw before drowning. "You ruined my life!" she screamed as I walked past. The officers held her back. I met her eyes, calm, steady. the eyes of an old woman who had lived through pain deeper than she could ever imagine. "I didn't ruin anything, Melissa. The truth did." Her lawyer tugged her sleeve hard, whispering, "Melissa, please, you're making this worse." She jerked her arm away. "Worse? Worse? I lost my husband. I lost my money. I lost my reputation." I didn't answer. People who lose everything are usually the ones who broke it first. Briggs stepped out of the courtroom and nodded at me. "Whether you want to hear this or not, Melissa's behavior this morning helps us tremendously." "I know," I said quietly. "But what hurts me is that Andrew had to see it." Briggs lowered his voice. "Where is he now?" "I don't know. He said he'd come, but he needed a few minutes alone." Briggs sighed. "I understand." When the hearing finally began, I sat in the second row. Melissa sat up front, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. The judge reviewed the file for a long moment. Long enough for me to know she saw everything. 8 transfers totaling $40,000, the judge read. A fraudulent account created in the plaintiff's name. A forged signature. A recently purchased Lexus titled under the defendant. And corroborating testimony from a third party regarding prior misconduct. Melissa jumped in. "Your Honor, she made all this up. She hates me." The judge looked at her the way someone looks at a tornado that doesn't know it's destroying itself. "Ms. Caldwell, I strongly suggest you remain silent. Nothing in this file suggests Mrs. Whitfield fabricated anything." Melissa bit her lip so hard I saw blood. The judge continued. "Given the evidence and the defendant's lack of cooperation, I'm approving the case to move forward and freezing the defendant's assets until further notice." Melissa let out a scream, not a polite courtroom gasp, but the sound of an animal trapped in a corner. "No! That's my money! She can't take it!" I opened my eyes and truly looked at her, for the first time not seeing arrogance, but fear. The kind that comes when a greedy person realizes the money was never theirs. The judge's gavel cracked through the room. "Order!" When we walked out, Melissa was surrounded by officers again, still shaking with anger. She lunged toward me. "You're going to pay for this, Irene!" I stood my ground, not 1 inch back. "Melissa, I've already paid," I said softly. $40,000, 3 months of sleepless nights, and a lifetime of trusting the wrong person. I tilted my head, calm as winter glass. "Now it's your turn." The officers pulled her away. This time, she didn't fight. She looked small, not because she was restrained, but because the truth had swallowed her whole. Andrew stood at the end of the hallway, leaning against the wall, looking like a man who just watched his world collapse. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracked. "I'm sorry." I walked toward him. "It's not your fault." "I let her control me, Mom. I let her insult you. I let her take your money." "Andrew," I said gently, resting my hand on his shoulder. "She attacked the softest part of you, your heart." He swallowed hard. "I want to fix this," he said. "I want to help you all the way through." There was no anger in his voice, no drama, just truth. And that was the sentence I'd been waiting months to hear. Not because I wanted him on my side, but because I wanted him on his own. Later that afternoon, Briggs guided me into a small meeting room. "We'll move forward with elder financial exploitation, fraud, and damages," he said. "If you choose, we can request reimbursement of the $40,000 plus interest, court fees, and investigative costs." I didn't hesitate. "Proceed." Briggs studied me for a moment. "You're stronger than people realize." I gave a faint smile. "Not stronger," I said. "Just old enough to stop fearing the things that used to scare me. When I returned home, the late afternoon Cleveland light hit the snow on my lawn, making it shine like shattered glass. I hung my coat, boiled water, and poured myself a cup of ginger tea. I thought I would feel relief, but instead, I felt something deeper, the quiet at the end of a chapter, the quiet right before the beginning of a new one, harsher, truer, and finally, freeing. On the morning of the hearing, Melissa didn't walk into the courtroom like a defendant. She walked in like someone who had already lost herself a long time ago, her cream-colored suit hanging on her shoulders like an empty shell, barely holding together. She looked at me from across the room, and in that moment, I finally understood. It wasn't me who brought her down. The truth was simply doing its job. The Cuyahoga County Courthouse was unusually crowded that day. Footsteps echoed across the marble floors, lawyers whispered along the walls, and the December cold of Cleveland seeped through every crack in the doors, chilling even the toughest souls in the room. I walked in with Briggs. Andrew followed a step behind, quiet but steady. Steady enough for me to know he was finally ready to face everything. Melissa sat at the defendant's table. No makeup, red eyes, hair messy, hands trembling. Nothing about her looked polished anymore. No Lexus, no smug smile, no power. Just a person staring down the one thing she believed would never come for her. As soon as the session opened, Melissa's attorney shot up. "Your Honor, my client requests that the case be dismissed due to..." The judge raised a hand. "Counselor, I've reviewed every file. Mrs. Irene has proof of forged signatures, bank statements, and police confirmation that the fake account was registered using your client's phone number. There is no basis for dismissal." Melissa lowered her head. A tiny movement, but enough for me to know she understood exactly where she stood. Briggs rose, voice steady as stone. "Your Honor, we'd like to present the evidence in chronological order." He placed the stack of documents on the table, the same papers that had turned my entire life upside down these past weeks. 8 transactions, totaling $40,000, were pulled from Mrs. Irene's account and moved into a fake account created under her name. This is confirmation that the account was registered using the defendant's phone number. The judge nodded. "Accepted as Exhibit 1. Melissa's lawyer tried to interject. "Your Honor, my client has been under significant emotional distress." The judge cut in, calm but firm. "Counselor, emotional distress does not explain forged signatures." Andrew's hand tightened around my shoulder. He was shaking, not from fear, but from a year's worth of anger finally rising to the surface. Briggs continued, lifting a photo of the Lexus. "Exhibit 2. The defendant purchased a new Lexus for over $40,000 immediately after the 8th transfer. Her income cannot support this purchase." Melissa snapped. "That was a gift. Andrew bought that for me." Andrew stood up so fast the bench creaked. "That is a lie." The entire courtroom fell silent. I turned toward my son, standing tall, his voice raw but clear. "Melissa," he said, "you told me it was a used car. You never told me you bought it with my mother's money." Melissa's face flushed red. She looked around desperately, like someone drowning and realizing no one was throwing a rope this time. Briggs pulled out a yellow folder. Exhibit 3. Records from the defendant's former workplace. Melissa was internally investigated for taking money from coworkers. A small amount, but the same pattern. Her lawyer snatched the folder. "This is hearsay, not evidence." "We have the emails," Briggs replied. "Printed. Verified." The judge turned to Melissa. "Do you have anything to say?" Melissa clenched her jaw. "No." And for the first time, I heard her tell the truth. Then came the moment everything hinged on. Briggs placed 2 enlarged signatures on the stand. "Your Honor, this is Mrs. Irene's signature, a smooth, familiar stroke. And this is the signature used in the 8 transactions, a stiff, forced hand, not mine, not even close. Our handwriting expert will testify." The expert stepped up. "There is no doubt. These signatures were not written by the same person. The angle, stroke pressure, and line rhythm are entirely different. The signatures on the transfers are intentionally forged. The courtroom murmured. I looked at Melissa. She stared down at the table, shoulders shaking, as if the truth itself were kneeling on her spine. The judge tapped her gavel lightly. After reviewing all evidence, I find that the defendant, Melissa Caldwell, engaged in financial exploitation, identity misuse, and deliberate deception toward the plaintiff. Melissa broke down, not out of remorse, but because she realized the court was no longer her shield. The judge continued. I order the defendant to repay $40,000 to the plaintiff, plus accumulated interest, court fees, and investigative costs. The total amount due is $54,700. A punch made of words. Melissa stumbled backward into her seat. No, I don't have that money, she screamed. The judge's voice remained steady. That is the consequence of wrongdoing. Mrs. Irene is not responsible for your actions. Her attorney dropped his pen in defeat, and I exhaled for the first time in months. Not joy, not triumph, just relief. A heavy door finally closing. After court, Melissa stood in front of me. You won. You destroyed my life. I looked at her. No anger, no satisfaction, just clarity. No, Melissa. You destroyed it yourself. She swallowed hard. I loved him. Love doesn't steal from the mother of the man you claim to love, I said softly. That's not love. That's possession. She walked away. Not fast, not furious, just gone. Like a shadow that no longer knew where to stand. Andrew approached, eyes wet. Mom, saying thank you isn't enough, but you saved me. I cupped his cheek. No, sweetheart, I didn't save you. The truth did. He hugged me, a grown man holding on like the little boy who once came home scraped and scared, except this time he wasn't bleeding on the outside. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the Cleveland wind lifted the last dry leaves of the season, and for the first time, I felt something I had waited months to feel. Justice might have stood on my side today, but there was still one final chapter left for me to live. A chapter of healing, a chapter of family, a chapter of hope. The night of the verdict, Melissa vanished. She didn't go back to her apartment. She didn't go to her parents' house. She didn't apologize. She didn't send a single message. But at exactly 9 p.m., one thing showed up on my porch, a gray envelope. Her shaky handwriting spelling my name, Irene. I stood on the front steps, the porch light reflecting off the rain-soaked pavement, and I knew immediately this wasn't an apology. People who are truly sorry don't leave breadcrumbs like someone fleeing the scene. I opened the envelope. No letter, no money, just a photocopy of her debt notice. I understood right away. Melissa wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was trying to paint herself as the victim, as if she were the one who'd been robbed. I folded the paper neatly and slid it into my justice journal, the place where I had documented every red flag since the first day I felt something was off. The truth had never lied to me, not once. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 6:12 a.m. Andrew. Mom, I'm on my way over. Don't go online. There's news about Melissa. I turned on the TV. Breaking news. A 33-year-old woman, identified as Melissa Caldwell, was found unconscious near the Cuyahoga River. She is expected to survive. I stood still, not in pity, but in that heavy sinking awareness that a storm was finally closing in on itself. Andrew walked in moments later, coat still smelling of cold air. Mom, I think she did it on purpose, he said. I placed a hand on the kitchen counter. No, I said quietly. People backed into a corner will grab whatever they can, tragedy or truth. I put on my coat. Let's go. You need to face this, and so do I. Metro Health had that familiar hospital smell, cold antiseptic, white halls, and a silence that felt like everyone there was carrying a private burden. Melissa lay in room 518, an IV in her arm, hair plastered to her forehead, eyes half open as she saw us. "Why are you here?" she rasped. I answered honestly, because no one deserves to die over a mistake, but everyone deserves to live with their consequences. She turned her face toward the wall. "I have nothing left." Her voice cracked. "No money, no home, no Andrew." Andrew stood still beside me, grief, relief, and bitter clarity all fighting across his face. "Melissa," he said softly, "you didn't lose me because of my mom. You lost me because of you." She let out a rough, broken laugh. "I just wanted a better life." A step closer. "There are ways to build a better life without stealing someone else's." Her eyes closed. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I shook my head. "Forgiveness isn't a gift I give you. It's a gift I give myself." After leaving the hospital, Andrew and I drove along the river. The December wind cut through the car door like a reminder to stay awake to life. "Mom," Andrew said, eyes on the road, "I want to do something." "What is it?" "I want to tell this story, not to humiliate Melissa, but to warn other people so they don't go through what you did." I looked at my son, no longer the confused boy being pulled by someone else's strings, but a man choosing his own direction. "That's exactly what I hoped," I said. "Justice isn't the end. It's where the rebuilding starts." Later that afternoon, Briggs stopped by with a bottle of hot tea and an envelope. "Congratulations, Irene," he said. "You won." "I don't feel like I won," I told him. "I just feel settled." He nodded, setting the envelope on the table. "This is the confirmation. Melissa signed the repayment plan. It'll take her years to finish, but the law has placed the responsibility where it belongs." I nodded. Not happy, not triumphant, just aligned, balanced. Briggs paused at my doorway. "Irene, you may not realize it, but your story is spreading. A lot of older adults get financially exploited by their kids, by in-laws, by people they trust. They hear what you went through, and for the first time, they don't feel alone." I froze. It was a moment I never expected. That evening, Andrew came again. He was holding a small wooden box. "Mom, I want you to have this." I opened it. Inside was a note I'd written him when he was 17, the first time he tried to drop out of school and I had to reset our boundaries. "You don't owe me your life, but you owe yourself a future." His voice broke. "You were always right, Mom. I just didn't listen." I pulled him close. No one grows up without messing up. What matters is that you come back. Andrew rested his head on my shoulder like he used to when he was a boy. His breath left him in a long, shaky sigh, as if years of guilt finally slid off his chest. "Mom," he said quietly, "I want to move closer to you, at least for a while. I need to rebuild my life from the right foundation." I smiled. This house is always open. But this time, you walk in on your own 2 feet. 3 days later, I got a phone call. A social worker from the Senior Advocacy Center. "Mrs. Irene, we'd like to invite you to speak at our event on elder financial exploitation. Your story could change how our community understands this issue." I stood in my kitchen, sunlight catching the gold edges of my justice journal. "I'm not a speaker," I said gently. "We're not inviting a speaker," she replied. "We're inviting a survivor." I closed my eyes. Maybe this was the road I was meant to walk. A road where the truth is spoken, not to hurt, but to protect those no one else protects. "I'll be there," I said. That night, as I wrote the final lines in my justice journal, the wind outside carried the faint smell of the season's first snow. I opened the notebook. At the end of part 10, I had written, Justice has structure. But tonight I added, and so does healing. I closed the book. Light, clear, at peace. Tomorrow I'll stand in front of hundreds of people. Tomorrow I'll tell them how a mother who thought she'd been drained empty found herself again. Not because of money, not because of a courtroom, but because of truth. And because of something Andrew told me before he left tonight. Mom, I want to become someone you can be proud of. And I told him the same way every mother listening to this story will understand. You don't have to earn my pride. You just have to live honestly. That was the moment I finally understood. Family isn't something you're born into. Family is something you build. Through truth, kindness, accountability, and the courage to begin again. The message came at exactly 6 a.m. the next morning, and it stopped me cold in the middle of my kitchen. I had been nominated for Ohio Senior Advocate of the Year, not because of the lawsuit, not because of Melissa, but because my speech at the center the day before had gone viral. Over 2 million views in 24 hours. I stared at my phone, and for the first time in months, something stirred in me that I thought had been emptied out completely. Pride. Not the pride of winning a case, but the kind of pride that comes from knowing that a 68-year-old woman, a woman who'd been tricked out of $40,000 by her own daughter-in-law, was now being spoken of as a symbol of quiet strength. I went to the awards ceremony wearing an old wool coat, the same one I wore the night Melissa hurled her cruel words at me during that family dinner. But tonight, it didn't feel like a reminder of pain. It felt like soft armor proof that the oldest things we own sometimes carry the deepest resilience. The Cleveland Convention Center glowed with warm lights. The hallway was packed. People recognized me. You're Irene, right? Your story helped my mom leave her financially abusive marriage. You made me speak up after my brother drained my savings. Thank you for saying out loud what the rest of us were too afraid to admit. I nodded. I still wasn't used to being a voice. When I stepped on stage, the lights hit me. Not harsh, just warm enough to remind me how far I'd come since the day I stood alone at the Key Bank counter, begging someone to explain where my $40,000 had gone. I took the microphone. I don't have a prepared speech, I said. All I have is the truth. Silence washed over the room. There was a time when I thought my biggest enemy was a young woman named Melissa, someone who treated love like an account to withdraw from. But the truth is, my biggest enemy was silence. I paused. Silence lets manipulation grow. Silence feeds shame. Silence turns wrongdoing into routine. And I was silent for far too long. My eyes drifted to the audience, to Andrew sitting in the front row, hands clasped, eyes shining with something I hadn't seen in years. Pride. What I've learned, I continued, is that truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be spoken. I ended with the line I'd written in my justice journal the night before. Justice isn't the end. It's the beginning of becoming whole again. The applause rose. Not loud, not wild, but long and deep. The kind of clapping shared between people who carry the same kind of wounds. After the ceremony, Andrew and I walked along Lake Erie. The cold wind slapped our faces, but I felt like I could breathe deeper than I had in years. Mom, Andrew said, hands in his coat pockets. I had no idea how strong you were. I let out a small laugh. You didn't know because I never had to prove it. And you forgive Melissa? He asked quietly. I stopped walking. Forgiveness doesn't erase the wrong, I said. It just opens the door so I can keep moving. Andrew nodded. He understood. And that night, under Cleveland's purple winter sky, I knew my son was finally standing on the side of truth, not the side of blind loyalty. 3 weeks later, the Cuyahoga County Court sent the final notice. Melissa must repay $40,000, interest, court fees. It would take her years, but she would have to do it. I placed the notice inside my justice journal and closed the book. I thought I would cry, but instead I felt something else. Lightness. Justice had done its part. Now it was my turn to live mine. One rainy afternoon, while I was peeling apples in the kitchen, there was a knock at the door. Andrew. And he wasn't alone. Behind him stood an older woman with silver hair, shoulders slightly hunched, holding a worn coat in her hands. "Mom," Andrew said softly, "this is Mrs. Harris, Melissa's former neighbor. She wants to talk to you." I invited her in. Mrs. Harris gripped my hands tightly. "Irene, I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she whispered. "I saw the signs. I saw her flaunting things she couldn't afford. I saw money coming from nowhere. And I told myself, it's not my business." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but sometimes what we ignore becomes everyone's business. I squeezed her hands. "No one can fix the past," I said gently, "but we can change the way we live the rest of our lives." She nodded, tears falling onto my kitchen table like tiny beads of late afternoon light. A few days later, the community center called. They wanted to use my story in a national training on elder financial exploitation. I stood in the same kitchen hallway where I had once trembled holding Melissa's forged statements, and I realized the circle had finally closed. Not to end something, but to open something new. Months passed. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. Cinnamon tea every morning, watering the lavender pots on the porch, writing new pages in my justice journal, not in the voice of a wounded woman, but of someone rebuilding herself from the inside out. Then one evening, Andrew knocked. "Mom, I have news." He handed me a sheet of paper. I got accepted into the community financial training program. They said I have a drive to live honestly. I smiled. "And where do you think that came from?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "From you." I looked at him, not the 6-year-old who used to run circles in the backyard, not the young man blinded by the wrong kind of love, but a grown man standing steady in his own truth. And I knew this was my real victory, not in the courtroom, but right here. And here is what I want to say to anyone hearing this story, especially anyone who thinks they're too old to start again. Dignity doesn't age. Justice doesn't age. And neither does your second chance. If this story touched you, tell me the city you're watching from. Hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that truth always arrives on time, even when our hearts think it's already too late.